Continuing with the education theme this morning, having spoken to National Professional Teachers Organisation of South Africa, or NAPTOSA, we now talk to the South African Democratic Teachers Union, or SADTU. The latter has also expressed their concerns about the safety and health of both teachers and learners when schools reopen. The union has asked the Department of Basic Education to take stringent measures to ensure the safety of learners and teachers. SADTU also requested that the Education Department provide schools with temperature scanners. The Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, will address the nation later this morning to give directive for the rest of the academic year. We are thinking that that's what the briefing is going to be about. Xolani Fakude, the Secretariat Officer of SADTU, joins us via Skype. Good to have you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning on the program.
Thank you, Leanne. Firstly, let me greet the viewers as well, and thank you for the question.
All right, thanks very much, Xolani. Now, if we have a look at the issue of schooling and how much has been lost already in this academic year, how is SADTU feeling about schools going back? And, you know, when do you think this should start happening?
Well, firstly, and we certainly are concerned about how the academic year is being affected by the pandemic. It is a certain concern to us, and our members have even registered quite a high level of anxiety amongst them. So in our view is that everything must be done to ensure that the environment is safe for us to go back to school first, even before we can start talking about being in class or not. Fact of the matter is that we would want to get the academic year back on track as soon as possible, but at the same time, what is important, that must not happen at the expense of the safety of the educators and at the expense of the safety of the staff in the context of the education support personnel as well.
Are you privy to any information whatsoever at this point as to, you know, we're talking about level 4, the country is moving into that stage from Friday. Do you have any information as to what's going to happen with education? Because really there's been deathly silence from the department.
Well, I can assure you, Leanne, that in the background, we actually are working. We have been in constant communication with the Department of Basic Education. I was listening to Basil from NAPTOSA even earlier here mentioning the same as well. So we're in constant communication with the Department of Basic Education. Plans are being set up, plans are being made. However, what will be important in this case, so that we can also manage the flow of information such that it can be accurate, such that it can be clear and helpful, is that the Department of Basic Education is indeed going to be making a pronouncement shortly about what then should happen, what the collective thinking is amongst the stakeholders about how the academic year can unfold for the rest of the year.
And one of the questions I asked NAPTOSA, I ask you the same, is the relationships and the discussion between the department and the unions. Have you pretty much so been on the same page? Have there been any conflicting views with regard to the way forward, or would you say that these discussions have been very much so, you know, in line with how you would like to see schools operating?
Well, I can assure you that we are very much on the same page with the Department of Basic Education. In actual fact, our interaction with them up to this point has been extremely cordial, and there is an appreciation that what we need here is a kind of a collective approach. Yes, there will always be those contradictions that will exist between the employer and the employees, but I can assure you that in this particular case, Leanne, we all have indeed been working together, we all have been pulling together, and we are very confident that the plan that is going to come out and be placed by the Department of Basic Education will indeed be tangible, it will indeed be implementable, especially because we have been involved as far as much as possible as the unions, that is. So I can assure you, and assure our members as well, and assure the country, that our working relationship with the department, even in this instant, has been extremely cordial and quite fruitful indeed.
So, you know, it's good to see that unions have been in discussion with the department. Who's been in discussion with parents? Because that is it's a big stumbling block as well. I mean, we just posed a question to some of our viewers. Many of them are parents, in fact, the majority of them. And then, of course, you've had some of the learners responding too. But many of them are absolutely petrified sending their kids back to school.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there are SGP formations that we believe in the Department of Basic Education in this multi-stakeholder approach that it has been propelling. There are those SGB associations that the Department of Basic Education would have been interacting with as well. But now the question again is quite importantly, and as to how then are we even getting in touch with the parents? And that is where platforms such as yours come into the picture. That is where the SABC comes into the picture, for instance. You would know that in actual fact, we have deliberately even been engaging the Department of Basic Education and encouraging them to say that let's explore other platforms such as the public broadcaster, for instance. So as soon as the statement is made by the Department of Basic Education, we expect that indeed the information will start flowing quite rapidly as to how the rest of the plan then unfolds for the academic year.
You know, one of the biggest concerns, and I know this is from your perspective, is the health and safety of learners and of teachers when it's time for schools to reopen. I posed this question to NAPTOSA as well. The state of schools in South Africa leave a lot to be desired, and it's always been not necessarily because of COVID-19. This has been something that has been emphasized by yourselves and many other unions and everybody with regard to there is no running water, the soap is not there at the schools, there are no toilets, they are not clean places. How is it going to work? I mean, talk to us about your concerns and how we're going to get through this.
Well, the fact of the matter, Leanne, is that indeed there are historical challenges within the education system. Now, what this pandemic has done is that it has sort of even amplified the inequalities that exist within the education system, which for many, many years, as you rightfully said, SADTU would have been talking about. For instance, we know that right now during the lockdown period, there are other learners who are from the more affluent schools who would have been having access as well to online resources to even continue their learning, whereas there are others in far-flung rural areas who would not necessarily have the same platforms. Those are the kind of concerns that we have been raising. So the inequalities, and will do nothing but obviously amplify the kind of challenges that exist within the system. So what we have done as a union, we have been very, very clear with the Department of Basic Education. We have set on the table no less than 14 conditions that we are saying must be met even before we can start talking about going back to school. And one of those are indeed related to the basic infrastructure, basic education infrastructure that we have been calling for many, many, many years. So what we are saying again is that perhaps let us take an opportunity, and let us take this opportunity of this pandemic to actually re-engineer how we do things as a country as well. Let us re-engineer our priorities. It is unacceptable that this day and age, you still have got schools that have got pit-like trends. And it therefore tells you that how are they even going to deal with a COVID pandemic that demands that there must be some serious hygiene protocols that are observed. So those are some of the historical challenges that are obviously going to be compounded by this pandemic. But then we are saying as a union that let us take this opportunity to re-engineer and recalibrate how we actually do things and prioritize as a matter of agency in this country.
That is something that certainly needs to be worked on. We've been speaking about this for years now, and one hopes that this is fast-tracked. But there are other issues to deal with right now. I mean, let's talk about the vandalism of schools at this point in time. During the lockdown, the last time I had a look, I mean, there were about 397 schools that had been vandalized, either burnt down, robbed, computers gone, desks gone. You know, these schools are basically now almost empty shells if they're still standing. What's going to happen there?
I am actually quite happy posing this question. That is precisely why SADTU has launched what we call the I Am a School Fan campaign. Now, this is a campaign that says that we must all take responsibility of the schooling environment. We must all take responsibility of the structures that we have built and that are meant for public good. Now, we are still living in a country whereby it is normal when there is a community protest, and it is normal for communities to burn down a school, to bargain for the local municipality to close down or fix potholes, for instance. It will be normal to burn a school, but then you will leave the tavern right next door quite standing. So it tells you that we've got a societal issue that we must deal with. This is a mind shift, a mindset that we need to really embrace as South Africans, to say that the school environment and the optimum environment that we want to achieve for both learning and teaching, it is our responsibility, our collective responsibility, all of us. Let us take that responsibility, because these criminals that burn down the schools, they actually live within the communities. These things should not be happening within our communities. That is, if we take ourselves seriously as a country. And of course, we are concerned as a union, because the very schools that are being banned are our workplace indeed. And we feel that we are unsafe. That is why, in actual fact, we've been speaking quite sharply as a union in the context of this School Firm campaign recently to say that let us all take responsibility and say no to violence in our schools, and let us see schools as safe havens as they should be.
I want to just talk to, you mentioned one of the big issues, and we all know this, I mean, the inequality that we've seen in South Africa has been exacerbated through this crisis. You see private schools and much more affluent areas and schools using online teaching, and they're trying as much as possible to continue with the academic year. But the reality is that the majority of schools and people in South Africa don't have access to computers, signal, online facilities. I mean, these things are an absolute luxury that the majority of the learners cannot afford and cannot use. Now, let's get back to where we find ourselves, that overnight, all of these things that we've been talking about during this interview are not suddenly going to be rectified, and that you talk about social distancing, hygiene in schools, overcrowding, no money, schools that have been burnt down. I mean, these things are not suddenly going to fix themselves. Where does this leave the academic year? And I ask you this genuinely. You will find that people that have got access are going to obviously learn more, and those that don't are going to remain stagnant. How do we meet this balance? What are we going to do with this academic year in South Africa?
Well, that's precisely what is, and I can assure you that currently, as we speak, we are busy. Our task teams are actually working together with the DPE in terms of the curriculum. Because what we are saying is that there certainly needs to be a way in which we even consider how we then restructure the curriculum for the rest of this academic year and reprioritize what would be viewed as being essentials, for instance, in an education point of view. So we do have got our task teams. The Department of Basic Education has got a team of experts as well who are looking into all those dynamics, which we believe that the Minister will be speaking about quite shortly. So yes, indeed, and the inequalities that exist within the system are indeed going to compound the problem. But then we believe that if we're going to come up with a collaborative approach, and let us even see the parents as well coming quite into the picture, even more so in terms of assisting their children, assisting our learners to continue the learning one way or the other throughout the schooling system. So what we are saying as well here, and I want to emphasize this, that indeed we'll be also calling to platforms such as the public broadcaster, both through TV platforms, through radio platforms, to assist us to find a way as to how we can then at least salvage parts of this academic year. Because the fact of the matter is that this is business and unusual, and not everything is going to be okay, and that is precisely what we are looking at right now.
It certainly is business unusual, but the usual is unfortunately how certain parts of society suffer during this time. Let's talk to transportation, because that's something that you've brought up as a union as well that you're worried about. I mean, let's just go back a couple of months where there was that video clip that surfaced of all these young children squashed into one taxi on their way to school. And I mean, I've even forgotten how many children were in there. Now that's a real issue of overcrowding in taxis, trying to get transport and get these kids to school. How is this going to work? I mean, these are questions I hope that the department and yourselves have been looking at, because this can't be allowed.
Absolutely. In actual fact, and one of the 14 conditions that SADTU has laid on the table before the Department of Basic Education was that the social distancing must by all means be observed. That is when certain classes or certain grades go back into the schooling systems, which means that even the transporting thereof, there must be a plan. Those who rely in scholar transport, which is part of the interventions that the Department of Basic Education has come up with, those who even rely on that, we must ensure that the mode of transport that we use is sanitized, there is fumigation that takes place, and the conditions are safe, and indeed even within that space, the social distancing is observed. Our concern, Leanne, is that we need to go back to class at some point, and we need to continue observing the 1.2, 1.5. Right now, in fact, was speaking about 2 meters social distancing. We need to also talk urgently about how we're going to maintain that in a classroom setting, a classroom whereby there are 70 learners, because we are still having a very unhealthy learner-to-teacher ratio in this country. Those are some of the conditions, by the way, that we have laid quite clearly and quite vehemently before the Department of Basic Education. We are saying that those must indeed be met first before we can even talk about going back to class.
All right. Xolani, thanks for talking to us and giving us your views from the union's perspective with regard to back to school for South Africa, how it's going to work, what the curriculum is going to look like, and all of these issues that we're hoping to get a lot more clarity from the department. There is that scheduled briefing that will be taking place at 10 o'clock. Remember, SABC News covering all of those briefings live, and it's going to come at 10 o'clock until 12 o'clock is what we've been told. So we'll wait on that one and get you more information with regard to how the education year, the academic year for South Africa will continue. Xolani Fakude is the Secretariat Officer of SADTU. Let's get you a headline.